welcome into a holiday edition of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. Alan Saunders not joining me today. We got Steelers DB on the show, though. DB, how we doing?
How we doing, man? Yeah, I'm off vacation mode. I've already cranked out a couple articles. I'm just getting back on the saddle a little bit, but man, like we finally made it to week 1 of the season, and for that, I'm very excited. So we're so close, man. We're so close.
I said it's a holiday edition of the episode. More importantly, for people watching or listening to this, I feel like because of their rooting interest, it is a game week episode of
Yes,
Steelers
sir.
Afternoon Drive, because next Monday we'll be talking about what happened in next Sunday's game. So very excited to dive into this. We're going to take some
And hopefully
questions that we
a
had.
victory Monday, right? Hopefully a
Victory Monday. Otherwise, it's a misery Monday. We decided that last year. I don't know if people have kind of ran with that name yet, but that's what it's been, at least on here, following
Okay.
a team loss. We got some questions from Twitter that Alan and I did not get to on Friday. We want to bring up. Also, maybe take a look at just like some bigger picture stuff. A question that I have for you, DB, as well as something. Don't want to fully dive into what Derrick is writing or wrote an article about already, but team outlook, what he's excited to see, things like that. So let's dive into it. I want to start with my question for you, DB. And like I said, this is a bit of a bigger picture outlook type thing, but let's go back a few months from when kind of free agency started. We saw them make some splashes and how we felt about the team at that point in time. And this, I would also include the draft as well. So kind of like where we were at this spring when this team broke for mini camp and stuff like that. How you felt the outlook of this team looked. But at that point, obviously, we hadn't seen them throw on pads. We hadn't seen them do against a different team and things like that. So where are you at with this team? Do you feel at all differently about what you've seen so far and your outlook of the team based off anything that happened since the spring?
Yeah, definitely an interesting question that you kind of proposed like right before we jumped on here. I think it's definitely a good thing to like look back on because, coming out of the draft, coming out of free agency, I think the word I kind of use is like cautiously optimistic, mainly because like the couple things that I really needed to see the Steelers do in the offseason. I wrote a big piece like after they were eliminated from the playoffs that I felt like the two areas of the team that they really needed to focus on was getting serious about upgrading like the offensive coordinator position and then also like the quarterback position. I felt like they did both of those things. I mean, you can criticize the kind of swings that they took, but I mean, I think they took 2 cheap swings at quarterback that I think could potentially provide like short-term solutions. And then also like, I think they brought in an offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith, who, even though he didn't have a ton of success in Atlanta, has at least he has a NFL caliber resume, which is something that you could not say for their previous several hires. So I mean, cautiously optimistic from that front. I also liked some of the things that they did in free agency, like Patrick Queen was an addition that I was a little bit surprised by, that they went out and spent the money to go get him, especially at that position. But I liked it, and then even in the draft, like I was a pretty big fan of the draft. I think on my draft recap, I gave them like a B plus. Now, having said that, I'm still cautiously optimistic about how this team's going to play. I think they could definitely I guess exceed their potential or win total of what Vegas is predicting them as. But I'm still a little bit underwhelmed by just like, I feel like the picture is almost a little bit incomplete in some ways, because as soon as they traded Deontay Johnson, I was like kind of telling people like that 1-for-1 swap wasn't necessarily a value that I was a fan of, but we kind of needed to see like what else they were going to do to address the receiver position. Well, like things have came and went, as like you guys have talked about on the podcast, and like we've all talked about like how that situation has played out. But now you're heading into the season with Van Jefferson as the number 2, Roman Wilson, 3rd-round draft pick. He missed all the summer. Like, how quickly can they get him up to speed? I don't know. I think there's still some legitimate concerns about that are very well founded about like the playmakers on the outside, and are they going to be enough to like support a quarterback room that isn't necessarily like, even though we're optimistic that they can give you better quarterback play, those guys aren't necessarily going to be guys that are going to uplift those around them, So I have questions about that. And I don't know. I mentioned this in my article that I wrote for Steelers Now today, but they're dead last right now in cash spending. Now that could change here in the next couple of days with a couple of extensions that we're kind of expecting. But it just felt like it felt like they were wanting to put both feet in, but they weren't like really ready to commit that they wanted to kind of go quote unquote all in, and they're kind of got 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So I'm a little bit just confused about like the resolution to the offseason.
Sure. I think for me, and I want to ask you about like just players or position groups specifically, because coming out of this thing, somehow, some way, I didn't know that it would be possible. I actually feel better about the defense than I did in the
Mhm.
spring, just because of what we've seen Nick Herbig look like in this preseason. I think that there's still something left there with Dante Jackson. That was a question that I had, and hopefully he's able to stay healthy because that would be another piece of the puzzle there. But behind him, Corey Trice answered the questions that I kind of had, what he would look like in a game. Now, how's it going to translate to the regular season? That's obviously another guy that has to stay healthy, but I really like what they can do on the back end in that aspect. I think we all have questions about slot corner, certainly going into the season. They didn't really answer that in a big way at all, but they're so much deeper on the defensive line than I thought they were going to be as well. And a big part of that is a guy like DeMarvin Leal seemingly taking the leap that he did in the spring and in the transitioning into the summer as well. So I don't know. I'm very excited about the defense. I had said I think that they looked like they could be a top 5 to 7 unit. Allen even more bullish than that, said he thinks they could be the best defense in the NFL. So I feel even better about them coming out of the spring than I did. So that's kind of where I'm at with the defensive side. On the offensive side, I don't know that they answered the questions about the offensive line, and a big part of that is injuries, but
Yeah, sure.
there's certainly a large level of concern that was even greater than there was before, because before it was more so just about youth for me. Now you couple that with the injuries that they've endured on that front, and it's just we're gonna have a lot of questions until they get answered.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you're spot on. I think the one glaring hole for me that kind of still is making me a little bit uneasy is the slot cornerback position, especially
Yeah.
because, like, even like week one, like we're talking game week, right? This is going to be the Atlanta Falcons. Well, Zach Robinson, the
Mhm.
Falcons offensive coordinator, comes from the Rams. They were heavy 11 personnel, completely the antithesis of what Falcons, were last
Yeah.
season under Arthur Smith. So they're going to be playing a lot of three wideouts. When that happens, you're going to bring the nickel on the field. Like, is Beanie Bishop I just don't know that we've seen enough of him in live game action to feel really confident about that, considering this is an undrafted free agent that we're talking about here. So that's a rookie. So I have big questions about that. But yeah, I mean, like the defense, like I'm pretty bullish on the front seven in particular. Like I just
Mhm.
think I think that this group could be really, really special from a pass rushing standpoint. And like I just don't see like the floor for this defense is like so high, like like as long as there's no
Sure.
significant injuries. Like, and when I say like significant, I'm talking like TJ Watt misses like 10 plus games. Like, knock on wood, that
Mhm.
doesn't happen. But we've seen like what kind of impact that sort of thing could have on this thing, and it could fall apart without him. But I think that this team has so much talent on defense that it's good. I mean, the offense too. Like, it seems weird to say this, and like people are going to take this out of context, but I don't really know the best way to frame it. But like last year when they came out of the regular season, I bumped them up from a projection of like 9 wins to 10 wins just after seeing it in the preseason. And like obviously that worked out in a way, but like in the offensive production didn't really translate to the regular season.
Yeah.
But I mean, they just look so bad for the majority of the preseason, man. And it like you said, I think a lot of the questions that we had kind of going into it, Broderick Jones, like he's a big part of this development. That you draft back-to-back tackles in the first round of 2 drafts, and then one of them is playing very obviously less than 100%, may potentially be playing out of position too. We could probably all agree that actually. So like, what is he going to look like in year 2? And then Fautanu only plays 1 preseason game. He misses time with an injury. So what is that timeline like? Is that going to hurt his development? Is he even going to be starting? Like, I don't even know. Like, Allen's at practice today. He could probably tell us who's going to be the starting tackles. I don't know. His guess is as good as mine. But so yeah, I mean, I have questions about the offensive line. I think the wide receiver position is the one that I just like look at and shake my head. Like I couldn't
Yeah.
spin it in a positive way if I even tried.
We could, and we have spent a ton
I
of time
can't
talking about the wide
personally.
receivers. Sure. Yeah, and I understand that. I understand where you're coming from. I share the same sentiment. I think everybody in
Sure.
the fan base does. And I think that kind of goes back to your original point. It's like, you make the Deontay Johnson trade. Okay, let's wait and see how this plays out. And I would have predicted time and time again, and I did predict time and time again, that they weren't done adding to the wide receiver room in a
Sure.
big way. They were, because they really didn't. Spend a 3rd-round pick on Roman Wilson. I honestly, the 2 guys they've signed to the practice squad probably aren't the 2 worst receivers on the roster right now. And if they can get caught up to speed with the offense, should probably be on the 53. To your point about Troy Fautanu, actually, Nick Farabaugh, friend of the show, posted a video about him. He actually looked pretty good out there. I'm curious to see what they do. I want to get your opinion on something that actually just came across my feed as I'm looking here. I didn't know that this became a thing, but I just saw it. Apparently, Jerry Dulac put out that if Isaac Seumalo's injury was more severe, they would have moved Troy Fautanu to guard for the season if Samala was going to miss the season.
Typical
What do you make of
Steelers.
that?
Typical Steelers. Only the Steelers could draft a left tackle, moving to right tackle, and then potentially moving to left guard before his first career snap in the regular season. I don't really know. I mean, Gary could be right about that. I don't necessarily doubt that that would have been the case. I'm very interested to see like what Favatanu looks like at tackle, though. Like I think I probably hit this home, but like if Favatanu, for me personally, if I was to rank the positions that I would have seen him as, like I talked about, like I think he legit has like 5 tool versatility, but I think that finding him a home is more important than anything else. But like I liked him at left tackle. Right tackle's fine as well. I would have been intrigued to see if he could play center because I think his mobility there would have been really interesting. Of course, the Steelers don't need that. They ended up
Mhm.
drafting Zach Frazier. I know a lot of people, a lot of smart people, smarter people than I, projected him at guard at the next level. Even like Brandon Thorne, who's came on my channel and talked exclusively and extensively about Fautanu. He's a big fan of him, but he thought that he would probably play guard, but in this system could play tackle. So I mean, could Fautanu have done it? Sure. But I think that the best case scenario for the Steelers is that he works out at tackle, and I still believe that that's going to actually be the case.
Yeah. With slot corner, I want to bring this up to you, and I don't know that you want this. I don't think many people in the fan base want it, but at least it's like a short-term solution. I almost wonder if we could see Minka play a lot of slot corner because you have DeMonte KZ who can play that other safety spot along with Elliott.
Yeah, I wonder that as well. I mean, when they go to those 3 safety looks, like who's going to get reps in the slot? I think on early downs, it could end up being Deshaun Elliott, but like, is he going to be the guy there if you want
Mhm.
to play like more like second long stuff? Like, I'm not really sure. I mean, that's always a possibility, right? Like Minka played a ton of star or nickel, going back to his days at Alabama. Like he did it he's done it over the course of time here and there in Pittsburgh too. I think that the entire fan base is probably right about wanting him back in center field because that seems where like he's played his best ball. He's been at an all-pro level. You think of like his first season in Pittsburgh and even not last year, but the year before where he had 6 interceptions. A lot of those came from, center field or being the guy that like buzzes down in cover 3, things like that. But my personal wish would be for Minka to get back to playing like what he describes as like Minka ball. Like I think I want him around the ball as much as possible. I think that the more variance there is to like his deployment, it seems like the
Mhm.
less effective he is. Like not saying that he can't do it because I think that he can. It's just the splash plays seem to kind of like disappear a little bit more when he's kind of moved around the formation. But again, like beggars can't be choosers, right? Like if they get a month into the season and like, I mean, would it really be, this kind of reminds me, and I don't want to like hate on Beanie Bishop because like when I was in Latrobe, I was impressed with Beanie. Like to be honest with you, like he made plays
Mhm.
the couple days that I was there. He jumped a screen, took it back for a pick six. He was really vocal on defense. I like that a lot. He was showing out on special teams. So I don't want to like say that he just can't do it. It seems like the coaching staff believes he can, but like this situation kind of reminds me. You remember when the Steelers like 4 or 5 years ago opened the season with like Cam Kelly at free
Yeah.
safety, and then like
Mhm.
he was off the roster a couple weeks later. I think he got into trouble, but like they got torched. It was against the Patriots, right? And then they ended up trading for Minka. I don't see like that scenario playing out. They're not going to trade for another all pro nickel
Sure.
cornerback, but I just wonder if like that's where we're at. If like I want to give Beanie credit for like progressing his way up the depth chart through the summer, but I just wonder if the Steelers didn't do enough to bring in valid competition to actually make this a competition, to feel good about where they're at. And I just wonder, like, are we going to get into a month into the season and say like we don't have a single nickel on the roster?
Mhm.
Like Minka's got to play there just out of desperation.
Yeah, the Cam Kelly incident as well as Sean Davis's injury. Like I know Ben getting injured obviously
Yeah,
impacted things, but Sean
right,
Davis also got hurt. So
right.
they had the need at safety for sure. And also what's funny is Cam Kelly wore 29. So like had he not been on the roster when we acquired Minka, probably not wearing that 39 to begin with, which he
Sure.
has kind of embraced, but at the time it looked very ugly. I think it's looked better now that we've seen him wear it and
Yeah.
played so well in it. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with things as well. We'll see how it goes. But
I
I
want
want
to
to
ask
ask
you
you. Oh,
something.
go ahead.
I want to ask you
Okay.
something real quick. I was kind of just like pondering this, like bouncing some stuff off of some people that I'm in a group chat with. But like, I just wanted to know, like, like if you had to narrow things down, like maybe like one thing for each side of the ball, like what are you most excited? Just being like game week, like what are you most looking forward to seeing on either side of the ball? If you had to narrow it down to just one specific thing.
Hmm. Um, the bias in me wants to just say the tight end utilization in Art's offense, but I'll say his ability, I think, to get free releases for guys. Like I know that Calvin Austin's kind of a guy that disappeared after getting so much buzz in the spring
Mhm.
going into the preseason. But I just wonder too how much of them was them not wanting to show anything, like even more so than normal because they are going to face Art's former team in
Mhm.
Atlanta. So not something that we saw under Matt Canada, him being able to get guys free releases off the line of scrimmage. And that's really the only way that I feel like a guy like Calvin Austin's going to be useful. A smaller guy like Roman Wilson obviously could benefit from that as well. So that for me, I'll say on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, how much are they going to be able to get Nick Herbig on the field as the third edge rusher? Because I think you got to find ways for him to play a good bit based off what he's shown.
Yeah. Yeah, both those things I think like improve just like usage of the pass catchers, getting the correct guys on the front side of the progression, getting those guys like something I think was like one of my biggest takeaways from the spring was just like you saw so many more like stacks, bunches, things like that, getting George Pickens lined up, not just like
Mhm.
isolated on the backside of the formation. Like he can do those things. You can throw him the goal balls, the back shoulders, but also like getting him some looks where he was catching screens. Like you got to see him work with the ball in his hands. I think that's exciting. I think for the offense, it's like really going to be the run game for me. Like how quickly can like one of the things I'm excited to see is like how quickly can this thing come together up front? Like even with the injury to like Sam Malo, which I
Sure.
do think like kind of sets back the trajectory a little bit. But like how quickly can Zach Frazier, develop into like a starting caliber center? Like how quickly can they get Troy Fautanu on the field and like what does he look like, especially in the run game? And then just how efficient can that thing be? And like can it be efficient enough to make this like a sustainable offense? Like I'm really curious about that. And then defensively, I think like you were saying a little bit like of a homer pick, but like my homer pick would be like just seeing Patrick Queen and Atlanta Roberts like work together, like tag teaming. Like that's definitely like the thing I'm looking forward to most. Just
Mhm.
because I think that the complements of skill sets there are so unique. Like you got Roberts, like every team needs somebody who's just going to run through the face of a puller. And like that's exactly what a Landon is. His physicality is like unmatched. I just love the way he comes downhill. Also a good blitzer. And then Queen, like with his range, I think he provides something that we really haven't seen in the Steelers uniform in quite some time. So seeing those two guys bounce back and forth and play the run off each other is going to be really fun for me just because I really enjoy and have an admiration for, how both those guys kind of play the game. So those would be like kind of my answers. But I was curious about what you thought about that.
Yeah, the other thing, like, is how much Peyton Wilson do we see? Is he going to be the dime linebacker? Because, like, that kind of threw me off to a degree just because I think that that's in there for him as a player. But, like, especially in the short term, like, Patrick Queen can do that. So I'm just
Mhm.
curious to see what actually happens in a game.
Yeah, I think like the results too. Like if you even go, of course, like he sat out the preseason finale, but like I did a video on my
Mhm.
channel for my channel members about like just Peyton Wilson and coverage. Like I think the results were like pretty mixed. If you go back to like that Texans game, had some
Mhm.
miscommunications, kind of falling asleep in coverage a little bit, like fixable, correctable mistakes. But like if you're asking him to be like the quote unquote dime linebacker, like that's putting a lot of responsibility on him that, even sometimes he didn't even have like at North Carolina State. So I think too, like Wilson to me, like from a schematic perspective, it was going to have like the furthest transition just because of the things he was asked to do in college. And just that's just the nature of the position too. Like going into the NFL, it's just completely different than playing in college, playing against college offenses, playing in college defenses. But yeah, I'm excited about that group for sure. I mean, I know Allen's had some hot takes. Someone actually tweeted me the other day and said, your boy Alan Saunders said that this is the best Steelers off-ball linebacker group that he's seen since he's been covering the team. So I guess he said that. I
Mm.
must have missed the pod that day that he said that on, or maybe he wrote that in a
I don't know.
column.
Yeah, I don't think he said that on here. I mean,
Okay.
that makes sense. I told you how he feels about the defense as a whole.
Yeah.
That group specifically, I mean, I don't know that I disagree, and that's without Holcomb for who
Yeah.
knows how long, like, or who knows what he's going to look like. So,
Right.
yeah, I'm there though, like with them
It's
as a
going to be
group.
fun.
So,
I think it's going to be fun.
um, that also you answered the same thing that I was going to ask you anyway about just like what you're excited for on both sides of the ball. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, but we can get into some questions and probably come up anyway because the first one here is interesting because Trent says, "Do you think Cordell Patterson could do any work as a wide receiver with so many unproven guys in the slot? Do you think that we see that at all? I feel like obviously, broke in as a receiver, more so the special teams value that he provided, but hasn't done that as of late. And he was in Arthur Smith's offense, not doing it
Hmm.
in Atlanta. So where
Yeah.
are you at with that?
Yeah. I mean, look, Patterson's probably going to be given some opportunities to catch the football, like some design touches and things like that. And like one of the things
Mhm.
about Art's offense is like he'll come out in 13 personnel and then they'll go empty. So like there will be times where Patterson may be in the game as a running back, but he'll be deployed as a wide receiver. He'll be go out wide, and there are advantages to doing that. Give your quarterbacks like good context clues before the snap, give them good pre-snap indicators, things like that. But do I see him like going out there and like running routes? Like, is he going to go run like a post route, or is he going to go run like some stop and go on the outside? I just don't see that really in the cards. Patterson's always had a really unique body type too, because like I think there's also a misconception about like what Patterson is if you haven't ever really watched him in depth. Like you would think like when you hear wide receiver turn running back, like, oh, he's a speed guy, because like Patterson was an incredible athlete coming out of Tennessee, but like he's not that type of runner. Like Patterson's a power runner. Like he's a physical bruiser who will like absolutely run through your chest. Um, but as far as like how he moves, I just don't think at this point, what's he, 34 years old, 33, 34 years old now? He's coming off like
I
a
thought he was
pretty
32 or 33.
32, 33. But I mean, like he's, he hasn't been healthy for most of the summer. It was really good to get him out there in the preseason and kind of see what that looks like. But I would be surprised if like he had like I would think that they'll probably try to get him some schemed up touches via like screens or dump offs, things like that. But like, do I see him going out there in like 11 personnel from time to time and just like being like a true wide receiver? Like I don't, and I don't honestly have very much. I don't really want to see that, if I'm being honest, even with the receiver room as currently constructed.
Turned 33 in March, but while you were talking
Okay.
there, it actually kind of made me think of something else that I want to see within this offense is like true empty, because last year we would see, we would see them go into empty and then they'd motion the running back in. So I want to see some actual empty sets as well. As you were talking, it kind of made that go into my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you're going to see more empty, like 100%. I think that you're going to see more empty, more pistol. The one thing that I don't know, like, I mean, I think I've written or talked about or done videos on Arthur Smith's offense about as much, if not more, than pretty much anybody in the world, and honestly, more than I probably should have this summer. But one thing that we haven't really seen that I'm kind of curious about is like, are we going to still see the same fullback usage that we've seen in Atlanta the past couple of years? Because I think they used a fullback on like 22% of their snaps last year. I don't think that it needs to be that high. But I mean, you look at like the pass catchers and the receiver room, it's like, it doesn't look like they probably should be playing a ton of 11 personnel. Smith, there are like some things that he likes to do, especially in the mid zone game where that kind of requires a fullback, depending on the front that you get. And Jack Coletto's not on the 53-man roster. Of course, they could always bump him up to the active roster, but like I'm not like one of the questions that I had coming in. It's like, it seems inconsequential, but to me, it's important. It's like, who's going to be that guy? Like when they want to have a fullback and want to go to like some 22 personnel or anything like that, like who's going to be the other back in the backfield? And is it going to be Cam or Connor Hayward? Is it going to be Pruitt? Like, are they going to use Darnell Washington? I still think that could be on the table.
Okay, I lean Pruitt right now out of the group. I don't know that. Like, I know that Connor Hayward's kind of a do it all guy. I don't think that to be honest with you, I think he's a weird fit for this offense. Like,
yeah, I do too.
He was somebody that I thought could have been a surprise cut. Alan and I talked about that. He wasn't. I think that there's a role for him. I don't think it's that. I don't think it's playing like doing what Arthur asks of his fullbacks. Do you know who we could see elevated and has done some H-back stuff? Is Ben Sterone.
Oh yeah, baby.
I mean, I wouldn't roll that out.
Yeah. Spoiler, not so much spoiler alert. There's someone on this channel right now that may be doing a Ben Skoranek film room this week, just because of how irrationally excited I am about the Skoranek edition. Like, nobody loves themselves some like H-back, fullback, wide receiver 5, special teams demons more than your boy does. I'd be a lot more excited about Skoranek's addition to the roster if like the receiver position as a whole looked better, because he's not really like I don't consider him like a true,
if they had somebody else as a wide receiver too, and this was the Scotty Miller replacement. Yeah.
But look, like if you go back and watch like when I was doing like the wineback stuff, like with Arthur Smith, like you go back and watch like some of his wineback variations, like there's times where like he was using Matt Collins as like the player that was like the lead blocker. So could Skoranek find his way on the field and into that sort of role? Absolutely. Cause like I think that there's valid questions. Like you just look at the preseason stuff. Who's the receiver that's going to give you like that type of really good blocking? Like Pickens is always going to do like his backside. He's going to catch corners off guard and throw them to the ground. I think that he still has it in him to be like a good blocker at the point of attack. It's just how much they're going to ask him or how engaged he is from a play-by-play basis. I just don't see like the physicality from like the others in the group. We haven't seen Roman Wilson yet. I know he was really willing to mix it up at Michigan, but he's also 180 pounds. Calvin Austin, like
Yeah.
the dude tries, man, but like
That's what I say. The
he's a buck
smallest
70.
dudes give the best effort.
Yeah,
Like,
he's a
it's a
buck 70.
shame. You would think Van Jefferson would be a better blocker than
He
he
just
is.
doesn't. But like if you watch him when they were asking him, so like one of the things that Smith and a lot of like the Shanahan adjacent schemes, like McVay does this too, which I think Smith's scheme probably pulls the most stuff from McVay, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But like a lot of the times, what you'll ask is like they'll kind of motion a receiver in, and then the receiver will insert on duo into the C gap. And basically, what that means is like he basically either has to like fit up a linebacker, he has to fit up a safety, depending on like which guy's there. And like they asked Van Jefferson to do that in the preseason. He just got like completely clapped backwards. And I just wonder, like, are we going to get into a month of the season? They're like, yeah, I mean, we know that teams are going to like, because that's the thing. Like, if you start moving Skoranek in there, you have to find some sort of counters off of that, like maybe like a play actions thing that you can put off of it to keep teams from being like, oh, 26 or whatever Skoranek's wearing in the game now for the Steelers. Oh, 26 is in the game. This is automatically a run. Like to where you're not tipping your hand too much with like your personnel usage. But yeah, that's an interesting addition for sure.
This kind of goes in with that. The base Yinzer. This has been a regular on the channel, by the way. His
Heck
questions. Yeah. Better chance Van emerges as a viable wide receiver 2, or Arthur falls in love with Roman and they go with him despite his lack of experience and nuance out on the perimeter.
I mean, I guess it depends on what you think is a viable number 2. Like I've seen some people saying like, because Van had like 800 yards even in 2021 when he was kind of falling out of favor with the Rams. I will say that there's probably a better chance that he falls in love with Roman just because some of the things that Art likes to do with like those play action crossers and like you mentioned, like freeing guys up with free releases, like using some of the, like, I think you can take a lot of what Roman did at Michigan and kind of see why the Steelers were kind of attracted to him in this offense, even though I do have questions about, like, is he going to be a guy right now that can just like go line up on the line of scrimmage out wide and defeat press coverage? Like I have significant concerns about that. I also don't know if he's as good of a route runner as like a lot of other people seem to think he is. But like the dude can run some crossers. Like he's got the speed to stretch vertically and horizontally. I think that he can absolutely do that. And that's like something that Art really likes in the play action passing game is like having that guy that can stretch the field on those crossing routes. And I think like Roman could make a pretty decent living off of that, even as a rookie. Now, Van is probably going to have more receiving yards, I guess, just because, like I said, Roman like missing all of summer, like is not it's just not a good thing. Like normally rookies that miss a chunk of time like that through training camp or preseason, they just get off to such slow starts. But I think he's more talented than Van personally. So I'll lean towards Roman there.
Yeah, to your point, the dude didn't even get through one practice in pads before having to sit out everything up until hopefully the regular season. That's the other part of this. We
don't even know if he's going. Yeah, we don't even know if he's going to go this Sunday. I guess that's probably a good point. I didn't even bring that up.
Yeah. So, assuming that he's physically able to go from week 1, I still question how involved he's going to be early. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a question by the time like week 10, back half of the season when we get into those divisional games. I think by then you'll see a clear separation with who the number 2 receiver is. I'm not going to say number 2 pass catcher because I think that's going to be Pat within this offense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think this question is different now, or the answer to this question is different right now than it will be in the back half of the season.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
And then finally, we'll get to one more here from Vincent Adams here. Will the run game finally be good enough to protect the defense this year? We keep saying how the Steelers can't play with explosive offenses, but with all 3 and outs the last few years, injuries become inevitable. And I don't know that we have seen the defense at its full potential due to that.
Oh, what do you think?
I mean, this is an interesting question. It's basically him saying they got to control the clock, control time of possession because the defense has played too many snaps over the last few years, leading to them to be, a lot of injuries have taken place. We have questions about up front, right? Like I think once again, this could be a different answer at the beginning of the year than on the back half of the season. When you get Sayamalu back, when these rookies in a second year Broderick, who's basically having another rookie season, if he is switching over to the left side, have played again. I think it's going to be pretty similar early on, but I think, and maybe this is just the optimism in me, by the second half of the season, because the offensive line has gelled, because I don't think it's going to be about the running backs. I love the combination that they have at running back. I think it's all about the offensive line. I think by the second half of the season, they are a team that's going to be able to control the clock. I just don't know how early that's going to be.
So I have a couple questions. One, are we really sure that that style of like control the clock is like, I mean, is that actually like a formula that will work in today's NFL? I'm not really sure that it is. I have my
I
doubts
mean,
there.
for the Steelers in the regular season, I think that
It has to be a
it's
viable option.
yeah,
I agree. The only other thing like I would say to this is like I'm just not really sure that that's like the run game isn't really where I kind of pictured, and maybe some other people disagree. It's not really where I pictured the Steelers really massively need improvement this season.
mm-mm,
Like if you look in years past, like going back to 2022, the Steelers were fourth in rushing success rate and third in rushing EPA per play. Even last year, that kind of dropped a little bit, but they were 12th in success rate and 10th in rushing EPA per play. They've been fine. Like they haven't been able to throw the ball. So like if you look at things like from just like a kind of a zoomed out view, the issues have been like the quarterback and the passing game. And I think we still have some of the same issues this year going into it, because I think the playmakers have probably gotten worse, even though we think like hopefully we get a little bit better quarterback play, a little bit better offensive coordinator ecosystem. But I don't really think like I don't necessarily agree with the notion that like the running game has been the cause of the defense being on the field too much. Like the offense hasn't scored enough points, but I think that there hasn't been a healthy marriage between being able to throw the ball and being able to run the ball. Smith is going to bring a run heavy attack where they're going to run the ball early, often, and no matter what the score is. So that is going to be the case. How much that helps the defense, I don't really know. My only thing is like they've got to be able to score points, and like I don't care how you do it,
sure.
you have to be able to score points when you need to, especially as you face like the good teams. That's my biggest questions about the ceiling of this team is like when they get into the playoffs or when they face playoff caliber teams, are they going to be able to go toe to toe when they need to score 28, 30 points? I'm skeptical of that as currently constructed, but who knows? We'll see. I do agree with your point, though. I think the offensive line will eventually gel and probably could be like a middle of the pack unit, like depending on how quickly the gelling happens and how healthy this
Mhm.
unit remains. But it should be better. Like this offensive line should be better than anything that Najee's ran behind in his career so far. And that alone gets me a little bit excited because, like you said, they've got a really talented running back duo. I think him and Jalen are good complements for one another. And I'm excited to see what it looks like. I just don't really necessarily buy into the notion that like the running game has been the problem.
That's fair, and especially if you look over the last 2 years, you're talking about the data that's in front of us. Look at what the second half has looked like compared to the first half for the
Sure.
running games. I feel like it was the second half of 2022 where we
Where they
really
really
started
picked
to
up.
see things come
Yep.
on with the run game. They did it in a very different way than what Smith's offense is
Yeah.
going to look like.
And
But
that's definitely
maybe the
something to
better
look for.
question isn't, is the defense going to be able to marry with the run game here? Maybe is the passing game finally going to be able to take advantage of what the running game has provided for the
And
offense?
that's the thing, like we've talked about all offseason, like this is not going to be like a sexy offense. It's just not. And I think like that's you can stamp that now, especially with like we know what the roster is going into week one, right? Um, but this probably isn't going to be a sexy offense by any means. But like the idea behind this is like you're just like uber efficient on the ground, and then you're able to stay in like positive situations, good down and distance and stuff, and just hammer teams over the top with play action. And like that's kind of like what Smith, I think, in his perfect vision, kind of wants to do. You look at like what they were able to do in Tennessee. I think obviously there are different players in the system. They had AJ Brown, Derrick Henry. I really like Najee Harris. I love George Pickens. I don't think they're on those guys' caliber. And then like we'll see what the offensive line brings, but or I should say on those guys' caliber yet. I don't want to say that they can't get there, even though it would be a little bit of a stretch probably at this point. But yeah, I mean, I do think that there's definitely a lot of questions to answer on offense, but it should be better. I'm just hoping that it's like it's baseline acceptable is my kind of hope.
There you go. All right. Well, good stuff. We went a couple minutes over. That's not bad for us, though. We're not in the 40s yet, so
Yeah.
that's good. But we'll wrap it up here. DB, tell the people where they can find you.
Yep. At Steelers_DB on Twitter and YouTube. Wrote a couple really cool pieces on predicting the 2024 Steelers season over on SteelersNow.com. You guys can read that. I also have another article coming out that is going to go over all of my bold or hot takes for the 2024 season. Basically, talking about some claims or some random Steelers related facts that I think are going to come true this year. And then at Steelers_DB on YouTube, got some film room stuff and some interesting content coming over there as well.
Is that what you just mentioned, just regular Steelers now, or do they have to have SM Plus?
SM Plus for the first article. I'm not really sure 100%
Okay.
on the second one just because it's not up yet. But yeah, I mean, definitely try to do that. I know that Alan talked about SM Plus too, like the ad-free experience there. But if you use code Derrick10, you get $10 off. It's $30 for the entire year. You get all of our Steelers stuff, but you also get the Pins and Pirates content. It's really underrated. I think it's worth it just for the Steelers stuff because myself, like I only follow and cover the Steelers. But if you're like a fan of all three teams, it's like even more of a bonus there. But I think it's worth it. Definitely check that stuff out.
There you go. It's great value. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. Hit us in the comments with
Yes,
your
sir.
thoughts, anything that we talked about today, how you're feeling about the 2024 season. If it's different than you were feeling in the spring, of course, leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. TikTok. We're on TikTok as well, 90-second clips of every episode, Steelers Afternoon Drive. And you can find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. Steelers DB and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.